Hey guys, how are you all today? I'm so excited to be doing a Manga Mondays first impressions review for you guys. I know I missed Monday yesterday, but that's because I stayed up really late powering like a lot of chapters in this series. Today we're going to be looking at Bride of the Water God. It is a Korean manhwa written and illustrated by Yoon Mi-kyung. And today's video is going to be a little bit different because usually for Manga Mondays I give you guys like a slice of general impressions about 4 different series, but today I really want to focus on Bride of the Water God. Shout out to the person who commented in one of my previous videos who suggested Bride of the Water God to me. I absolutely fell in love with it. I'm so addicted to it, and I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on it today. So basically, last night I read exactly 75 chapters, and I don't know if this can be counted as a first impressions because overall there's about 140 something chapters out, and it is still ongoing. So right now, my first impressions is just based on the fact that I've gotten a good chunk of the introductory bits and a lot more into the intricacies of the plot later on, because there are so many different twists, and at some point the twists get quite tedious because you're trying to figure out like which character is which, and that has to do with the art style. And so I'm gonna start off really generally by giving you guys a debriefing of what's going on with the plot, and then I'm gonna go into a bit of character development, art style, and whether or not you should delve into this series judging by what genres and what tastes. Bride of the Water God is a Korean manhwa, so right off the get-go you guys have to know that the story is told from left to right. So usually when you read Japanese manga, you read it from right to left, and for me it didn't take long to figure out that you have to read it the other way because the dialogue really doesn't flow or make sense. The story follows a girl named Soa from a village that has been plagued with a drought for a really long time, and in order to please the water god, Soa is chosen as a sacrificial bride so that the water god will be pleased and will send rain to the village. The interesting thing is that once she's sacrificed, she ends up realizing that the water god wasn't as scary or as menacing as all the stories have made him out to be. He actually turns out to be this like really aloof kind of person, and there's a lot of talk about like why there's a new bride that has been sacrificed, whether or not she's going to meet the same end as the previous brides, or whether or not she's going to actually stay in the water kingdom. So the plot progression follows a lot like court politics. So if you're used to things in K-dramas and ancient K-dramas where it's all about princesses and kings and like warring and power struggles, the plot in Bride of the Water God is very similar to that kind of setup. The only thing is that the Bride of the Water God series actually explores a lot of the different kind of characteristics and aloofness that gods or supernatural beings would have, because they have immortality and because they have certain factions or certain powers. They have inclinations toward different allies or different other gods. It's kind of interesting to see godlike characters engage with very human emotions. So usually you would think that there's kind of like a divide between Soa's views and the gods and goddesses views because she's human and she doesn't really know anything, but Soa is made out to be this very helpless and innocent villager girl, and she really doesn't know what's going on. I don't know how Soa has stayed alive for so long within the Water Kingdom, because everyone's kind of always plotting against her, or there's always some sort of like conspiracy or twist that she's caught up in. A lot of people have argued that Soa is a really annoying character because really she doesn't have much of a personality, and the reason why they don't focus so much on like character introspection in the series is because the series is mainly driven by the court politics going on within the Water Kingdom. But I would like to take this moment to defend Soa because she's literally like a 16 to 17-year-old girl that comes from a village in the middle of nowhere who is in a drought, who are ignorant enough to sacrifice someone's life so that they can have rain on the off chance that it will please the water god. So judging from Soa's background, how much she's been educated, how worldly she is or how not worldly she is, you can kind of get the idea why Soa always just kind of goes with the flow. The characteristics are quite gendered, and it's because the series takes place in an ancient Korean kind of setting. The interesting twist in the romance is that it's not just like a generic I fall in love with the water god, the end happily ever after kind of thing, and I was really curious as to why the series has been going on for so long, and the reason is because the romance comes in bits and pieces. So the way that the romance progresses is very similar to how arranged marriages would kind of progress in like ancient Chinese series or like feudal Japan manga series. But because there's such a distance between Soa and the water god, and there's so much politics going on between her and the water god and like all the other different powerful gods and goddesses and creatures, there's actually a lot to tell in the plot. And this is kind of what gets me to my next point. I wanted to talk about pacing, because the pacing in this story story is absolutely phenomenal. Initially, I thought it might slow down when she gets into court politics, it might drag on, it wouldn't be interesting, but every single little detail that's put in there, the small bits of dialogue, the small aside insertions of subplot, the little pieces of backstory, it all really makes sense. Sometimes it does jump a little bit because they want to get all the perspectives in before it moves on to the twist in the mini arc, but that really works out well because as the reader, you have all the little bits of pieces and information you need, and when you get to the final twist in that particular arc, you're so sure of what's going to happen, and yet there's that one little like missing puzzle piece that you still don't know about, which makes you keep reading. The chapters are done really well because it always leaves you on a cliffhanger, and it's not a cliffhanger that's just like laden with suspense, but it's enough plot development towards the end of each chapter that prompts you to keep reading, which is how I ended up reading 75 chapters in one night. The art is much more shoujo, it's much more excessive, and at times, for people who are not used to shoujo-esque kind of art styles, it might seem quite confusing because a lot of the characters have similar detailing in their eyes and similar proportions in their faces. What I found absolutely stunning about the art style is the mangaka's amazing ability to create architectural styles and landscapes. So because the Water Kingdom is such a like fantasy styled kind of place, it's almost akin to like a heaven on earth kind of setting. The mangaka actually does a really amazing job of bringing in classical and ancient Korean kind of architectural styles in with like a blend of fantasy. It's grounded enough in like realistic styles to make you feel, yes, this is just a mystical realm that is tied down to the cultural aspects of where the myth actually comes from. I actually found the character designs quite easy to tell, partially because all the different outfits on each character are so unique. Characters will either have different hairstyles, different hair accessories, tattoos on their faces, markings, capes, masks. The mangaka makes use of almost like every single thing you can think of when it comes to creating characters, which is why I think each of the characters are so impressionable for me. And none of the characters are excessive. They each play a very specific role in the plan, and as you read on deeper into the series, you really start to get an idea of exactly who is pulling the strings in the plot and who is manipulating everyone or who is being manipulated, and there's a lot of going back and forth, so it does require quite a bit of brain power to like remember all the little bits and pieces as you're going on in the plot. Once you really get into the story and into the world and into the court life, you actually get so attached to a lot of the characters. And a lot of times it's really difficult to tell whether a character is good or evil, whether or not that person is doing it for the sake of the kingdom or the sake of their powers or the sake of their allies or the sake of love. And there's actually a lot going on in the series once you kind of like look in retrospect to see how it's like developed in terms of like chapters. I would advise you guys to read this series in large chunks of chapters. You kind of have to read it all at once in one sequence to really get into the rhythm of the plot and the storytelling, and once you get into it, it's like really easy to just immerse yourself in it, and it's just a really, really addictive series. But anyways, these are my thoughts on Bride of the Water God. I actually approached this series a couple of years ago when I was like a lot younger in like middle school, and I actually didn't like the art style as much, which is why I couldn't really get into it. But a few years later, I have a better appreciation for like mature art styles bordering on josei art styles, which is why I think Bride of the Water God is an absolutely spectacular series, not only in art style but also in like storytelling. And if you are more into mature series, I would strongly urge you to read this. However, if you're used to something like action or horror or supernatural powers, I wouldn't recommend this so much because the plot is actually quite court-centered, and it requires a lot of strategic thinking on the reader's part to keep all the little bits of information in order. Once you get to like a certain climactic point in the story, everything comes in light of view, but not all the explanations are given point blank. So a lot of times you do need to kind of like figure out what's happened based on what you've seen previously. Read slowly, don't gloss over any details because they will help you figure out exactly what's going on. And I hope you guys really try this series. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this video, don't forget to like or subscribe for more from me. Next week we will be returning to our regular Manga Mondays, and of course feel free to leave me more recommendations below because I have been checking out everyone's recommendations. And if you guys are checking out more from me, the Manga Monday video comes on Monday, and a video of my choice will come towards the end of the week, so I will talk to you guys in my next video then. Bye!